pretty overwhelmed. This season feeling really overwhelmed, especially through another 2-page report in here by Sunday. And then I have a 5-page report.
Okay, almost there, guys.
Okay. You can do it. You can do it.
Okay, there we go. We're gonna make that a bit bigger. Okay, is that readable to everybody online?
Yeah, I can see.
Perfect.
I think I have 2 exams this week, and then I have a research paper that I haven't even started, due in a couple weeks, and then I've got some other, and then I've got like 3 or 4 assignments for my anatomy class, because she fell so behind that she has to shove them all at us this week.
So you're in the same boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all in the same boat. You
Yep.
just gotta keep each other up the float.
We've got to get each other, keep each other going.
Okay, I can handle it, you know? I'll just start skipping the gym some days.
Well, just think about it this way. At least you're not my kids who have been looking forward to spring break and weather that now suddenly drops into the 50s and it snows every day.
Literally.
So, they're kind of looking around going, this is spring break? This sucks. And I'm going, you live in Idaho. What do you expect?
But at least they have like an actual spring break.
Well,
Ours is just a week before finals.
that's true. Okay, so not to add and pile on to the list of woes, but next week we are going to talk about the final paper / project for the class. Okay, so we are going to keep doing readings and all of the other things that we're doing, but we are going to have an additional project that will be due right there at the end of the semester, right when everything else is due.
Can we turn it in?
You can turn it in whenever you like.
Yes, okay. That's what I'd like to hear.
Oh, yeah. Do you really see me say, no, you can't turn it in early? Ever? Okay. This is not the final exam. The final exam will be just like the midterm. It will start, well, yeah, it'll start on a Sunday. It will go until the next Sunday. You can take it whenever you like. It's open for as long as you need. It's exactly like the midterms, just different questions and things to discuss. Okay, most of you seem to handle the midterm pretty well. So structure-wise, I figured I would stick with that just to make things less difficult. Okay, so next Tuesday, I'm going to go through all of the instructions on how it's supposed to be done, and then we'll go over due dates and processes. Is everyone cool with that? Does anybody have any questions? Okay. I will go back and check on McDonald's. I thought I had everybody's stuff graded, but it looks like I don't. So I will go back and check on that. I was feeling pretty good because I thought I had gotten all caught up and everything was done. But I guess I haven't finished everything, so I apologize.
There's the only one, but that's,
Yeah, Winter, I need to worry about that.
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so, all right, so today we are working on Chapter 9. Chapter 9 is talking about what? Entrepreneurship and startup businesses. Why are we talking about startup businesses and entrepreneurship when it comes to ethics?
There's a lot of people, like when they're working for like a bigger company, they don't like the ethical like codes or like the behaviors of that company, so then they want to like change it and like make their own one.
Okay, the reality is most of the time when you're talking small business, there are going to be certain things that are not present in much larger businesses. For instance, you most likely will not have an HR department with professionals trained in human relations issues. So who's going to be responsible for that? Well, since we're talking about entrepreneurship as entrepreneurs, it's going to be you. Or you're going to be working for someone who's dealing with these things, right? For example, the Kinko's example. And Sam, I appreciated your contribution of this. I worked with a guy who would get really upset and then disappear for days on end because he felt like he could do that since he was the owner of the business, but that left me high and dry. So how do we work out ethical standards when we might not have the nice, large, fixed structure of larger business? How do we work when it's me and just me and somebody else? Or a small group of people, where we have to divide duties in ways that might not be normal in larger businesses or more structured businesses.
That's the problem too, because if you're really, really driven, and I got lots of feedback, which was, everybody had a really good point. If you're so driven, you're almost expecting everybody else to have the same. And then when you don't, or there isn't, you can have these bad behaviors, not that they're acceptable or okay. I wasn't saying that at all.
Mm-hmm.
What I did like was that eventually at some point he did recognize those, and then he did try to fix those, but still, he shouldn't have treated those other people that way.
Have you guys seen Elon Musk talk about that exact policy? Because he's always trying to work to max hours, 80-hour weeks is like the minimum for it.
Mm-hmm.
So when he's talking about paying his employees, he says that's my expectation. I'll pay them very well, but I also expect the same amount of them, but I expect that of
Myself. But that's one of the things, is that when you're a small business owner, your success or failure is basically on your shoulders. And therefore you tend to have a greater sense of responsibility to making sure things work, which often results in, if other people are working with you, the strain of everything that has to happen gets shared among that small group rather than diffused over a large group. So when people aren't pulling their weight in a small business, it's much more noticeable and much more impactful than it might be in a larger organization. Excellent. Okay, so let's get started for today, and Logan is first. Logan, going once.
Yep, I'm
Logan.
here.
Okay. What question would you like to answer?
I'll just do number 33.
Number 33. Okay. Go for it.
So what are some ethical issues associated with healthcare delivery and access? Would that be like confidentiality of doctor and patients
That's one.
and like physician assisted suicide?
Could be another.
I guess those are the only two that I came up with.
Okay.
Or like malpractice.
Okay. Malpractice. Okay. Any others want to jump in on this one? Let me make it a little bit bigger again.
Resuscitate orders.
Okay. Access to healthcare and access to catastrophic care. For example, what do we do when somebody has terminal cancer? What do we do if somebody has extreme injury but does not have the financial resources to pay for that kind of care? Has anybody here ever seen the movie John Q with Denzel Washington? Son has a genetic, they discover that his son has a genetic heart condition. And basically the insurance says we can't cover it, therefore, sorry, you're just gonna have to let him die. And yeah, I was a young father when I watched that movie for the first time. And let's just say I didn't sleep for a couple of days thinking about what I would be willing to do if something were to happen to my wife or kids and I don't have the financial resources necessary. Well, it was a hard in this case, yeah. I mean, and it was, anyway. I mean, and there's all kinds of examples like this. Yeah, questions of consent, questions of treatment. For example, my wife was watching a television show in which a young woman was pregnant, knew that how her parents would react, wanted to get an abortion, but knew how they would feel about it. So tried to get treatment herself, and the clinic contacted the parents. Now, there are some people that say, absolutely. But there are others who are saying, just because I'm under the age of 18, why do my parents get to control what I can or cannot do with my own body? I mean, there are significant ethical, religious, and moral challenges involved in healthcare that can be very difficult to navigate. Okay, thank you, Logan. All right, Jackson. Jackson going once. Jackson going twice. Okay, Porter.
I'll do number 1.
Number 1. Okay.
So it says, which of the following does an entrepreneur typically need to be willing to do to start a business? And that is C, select a product or service that will be sustainable.
Okay. Why not A, B, or D?
Well, the whole purpose of a business is to sell or produce something and make money. So you got to have that first before you can do anything else.
Okay. What about hiring a board of directors to manage the business?
Well, if there's nothing for them to sell, then they'll just be sitting around, not doing anything.
Yeah, normally hiring a board of directors to manage the business typically occurs when the business is a publicly owned industry. Okay, that's why you're bringing in the board of directors to basically look at the ethics and practices of how the business is being run, right? Because there are shareholders involved. If the business is still privately owned, there is no need for a board of directors. Okay. Same thing with self-financing. Is that a possibility? Yes, it is possible for people to put up the money on their own to make the business happen. Is that a necessity or requirement in order to start a new business?
There's like angel investors.
There's angel investing. There are small business administration loans, bank loans, and things like that. I don't have to have the cash on hand to be able to start the business. Okay, so self-financing means I pay for it myself. That can happen, but it's not required. And what about delegating the risk?
So delegating, if you pass it on to someone else.
If I'm starting up the business myself, it's very rare that I'm going to be able to delegate that to other people. Okay, excellent. Thanks, Porter. All right, Kaysen.
Yeah, can we do 39?
Number 39. Okay, go for it.
All right. Well, I would say they end up with a bureaucratic nature because as a startup becomes more successful, it usually requires more micromanaging to have a consistent business experience and culture as well. Because as a business grows, it becomes less personal and people have different standards of work ethics and how much they're invested in the company. And so it usually requires more managers to sit there and monitor and make sure everyone is doing what they're supposed to do because people rely on each other more.
Okay.
And if it's inconsistent, if someone's only working so many hours or does the work in only to a certain standard, it can affect the business as a whole. And so I'd say just to make sure that the experience for the customer and the employees, how they interact with each other, and for the overall productivity and of the business, it is required for it to become more bureaucratic and more shoot, I don't know how to put it, I guess. Requires it to become more bureaucratic to make sure it runs efficiently and smoothly with less hiccups, I guess you could say.
Okay, there's a term in here that I want to take a second. Let's define. We tend to use it pejoratively, which means it tends to be a negative. What is bureaucratic culture? What does the word bureaucratic mean? Sam?
My understanding, when it says bureaucratic culture, it is when a company or organization share the same kind of attitude, values, goals.
Okay, while that isn't necessarily what bureaucracy or bureaucratic culture means. Okay, bureaucracy is the specific assigning or delegation of responsibility. Tends to happen based on training, education, or specialization. Okay, so for example, if I have a background and a degree in human resources, where do you think I would most likely end up in an organization? Working or running HR, because I'm sent to where my specialties are most relevant. Okay, so bureaucratic culture tends to say authority and responsibility for certain tasks get assigned to certain people who have complete and total control over that particular activity. Classic examples of where this can work well and worse, for example, is the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, right? Almost every county in the country has one. What is the specific purpose and function of the DMV? Licenses and registration, typically for vehicles. Okay, can I go to any other office or department at the county level and get a license for my car? No, sole responsibility and authority for licenses is in that office. Why would that be helpful?
Because you know where to go to get it.
Number one, I know where to get it.
They get trained to do that one job.
They are going to know hopefully everything about that particular activity. They can answer any question you have about licensing or registering a vehicle. But what are some of the drawbacks or difficulties?
It takes forever.
Number one, that's the only place. So therefore, if they're not efficient, it takes forever. Is that what were you saying?
It becomes a problem when, you want to license vehicles that come from another state. So you hope that they do know what they're doing.
Okay, they know what they're doing, but it can be a very complex process.
Exactly.
What if there's somebody in that department that I do not get along with? It becomes very difficult to be able to work with them. Okay, so that's the idea of bureaucracy. So what's the difference between bureaucracy and bureaucratic culture? Because they're not necessarily the same. One is an operational model, the other is a cultural model. What's the difference between those two? Kason, you want to try that one? The difference between a bureaucracy and a bureaucratic culture. Okay, let me give you an illustration, and then I'm going to have you answer it. Okay.
Okay.
I walk into a small bakery. Okay, it's a family-owned bakery. And I walk in and there's nobody up at the front cash register. So I ding the bell and I wait. And I hear somebody in the back in the kitchen moving around. So I ring the bell again. Nobody comes. So because I really want those donuts, I go around the counter into the back, and there's a person working in the kitchen. And I say, hey, I would love to buy a dozen of your donuts. And they say, I'm sorry, I'm just the cook. You'll have to wait because somebody else is running the front desk. Based on that illustration, what is the problem with a startup having a bureaucratic culture?
The problem would be not enough people to sustain, I guess, every position or fill every position for that business, every job for that business, I guess.
Close. Close. But remember, we said bureaucracy is where people do what? They specialize. What happened here? Is it just that they didn't have enough people?
I mean, that would be a solution to it, I guess, but a part of the issue is that he refused to step out of his specialization as well.
That's it. That's what bureaucratic culture is. That's not my problem. That's not my department. That is bureaucratic culture. Now, in a large business, is that still a problem? It's still going to be a problem if I need help and there's nobody to help me. But in a startup, the number of people to be able to specialize becomes very problematic for the very reason we don't have enough people for people to say, sorry, that's not my job. Right? This is why people say, there's this old saying of, I am the chief dishwasher and, no, the chief cook and bottle washer. This idea that when you're in a startup, everybody does what? Everything. If I create a bureaucratic culture, wow, I don't know anything about that. You'll have to talk to them. They take care of the books. It's a statement I've heard a lot, right? I go out and do the jobs. I don't deal with money. It can be a very big problem for startups. Okay, thank you, Kason. All right, Andrew, you're up.
Let's do number 3.
Number 3. Okay, go for it.
So which is the most significant ethical pitfall of entrepreneurship? And that would be hubris, which is pretty much taking pride once you have your first glimpse of success with your startup.
Okay, so there's a difference between pride and hubris. Hubris is in a lot of languages, it's overweening pride. It's excessive pride. Okay? And that can lead us into all kinds of problems. Okay? And financing is likely not to be an ethical pitfall. It can be a practical one, but not necessarily an ethical one. Modesty tends to be a virtue rather than a vice. Okay? It can become a vice if it's too excessive. Right? But hubris, by definition, is a vice, and by ethics of virtue, this is one that we want to avoid. Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. All right, Megan, you're up.
Can I do number 2?
You can.
Okay, so it says, what percentage of venue-backed startups fail? And isn't it D, 75%?
Yes. So, venture-backed startups. What is that concept there of a venture-backed startup?
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
I'm not gonna lie, I really don't know. I thought I knew.
All right, so let's think about this. What is, anybody, a venture-backed startup? When we talk about venture-backed, what does that suggest? Subtle hint, I'm not sure if the folks online can see that. It has to do with money. Okay, so a venture-backed startup is a startup that gets financed. How? Did I just go to a local bank and take out a loan? I use investors. So investors are putting money in and saying, we believe in this project enough that we're going to put up our money to you to get it started. Why might that mean, what makes it more likely for those to fail than other models?
Less personal risk.
Number one, less personal risk for the person running the business.
Also, the investors have to see that your product or your service is good, or else they're not going to buy into your or invest into your company.
Okay, but the idea is that if it's an investor-backed startup, they have already done that. So they've already done their due diligence because they gave me the money to get started, yet I fail within the first year.
I think another big issue companies fall into a trap where they get a lot of money right at the start and they blow through the money and they fail because now they're broke.
Okay, because they have a lot of money to get started, they might be more likely to overextend themselves than if they had to get the money themselves. Man, when somebody's writing blank checks or large checks, spend what you have to, right? Which can be a problem. Any other ideas?
Well, venture back doesn't necessarily mean there's a product yet, so the product might just not come to fruition if it's fail constant.
Yeah, I mean, it's very possible that people haven't done the necessary legwork to be able to figure out the solvency of the product, okay? I have to be honest, every once in a while, for some strange reason, I'll flip through and watch Shark Tank. I love the products, but I realize very quickly, is it enough just to have a good idea? Sometimes. But I would say that at least 60% of the time, the person has a great idea and that's about as far as they've gotten. And when the sharks start talking the specific financial things that are going to happen for that product to move to the next stage, people are just in over their depth. They have no idea what they're talking about, other than I have this great idea for this great product that I want to sell. And so venture startups like this can allow people to start when they haven't necessarily done enough work to prepare. So, all right, excellent. Okay, thank you, Megan. All right, Zach.
Yeah, I'll take number 45.
Number 45. Okay, go for it.
Can entrepreneurial companies foster a work-life balance? I'm gonna say no, because no matter how hard an entrepreneur can try, their work life is gonna always bleed into their or not always, but it's gonna bleed into their personal lives at some point, or vice versa. Just because somebody clocks out at the end of the day doesn't necessarily mean that they're done with work. They have to respond to emails or answer phone calls and do different things. I don't think there's going to be any sort of perfect balance between your work life and your personal life.
Okay, that is a reality. But does that mean that there is no potential for work-life balance?
I don't know, because I mean, well, as an entrepreneur, you're always thinking about moving forward with your company and doing a lot with your company. I would say it's going to be difficult. I'm not going to say it's impossible. But like for regular employees, I'd say that it's probably easier because they just come in, clock in, do their shift, and clock out. I say it's probably a case-by-case situation.
Got something you want to add?
I would just argue 400%. Software business, you have a software developed, you're just still doing updates for a week. No one's hurt, but if you're running like a clothing business, you're on the clock all day, every day. Like when that phone rings, you have to be ready. So depending on the business, you might not have a work life, or you might have a great work life.
Okay. I think that there's a couple of factors that go into the answer to this question. I would talk about, first of all, the lifespan of the business. Young businesses are like young children. Probably the first 10 years of life are spent just trying to keep that thing alive. Okay? And so I would agree with Zach, when it's a brand new business, you probably have a very unbalanced work-life balance. It's going to be very heavily shifted towards work. However, as that business starts to stabilize, as you build a client base that is consistent, I believe from my own experience that life-work balance can kind of balance out. And that even though I have regular customers, I'm able to start establishing boundaries of when I'm off work, I'm off work. I have enough stability in terms of client base and things like that, that I can take time off. I can focus on other things that I can't do when I'm first getting started, but as the business matures, I probably can get into that. Okay? The other question that this suggests is, can entrepreneurial companies, we're not talking necessarily even small businesses. For example, Google was originally an entrepreneurial business, right? It started out with two guys just programming in a garage. So did Apple, right? Entrepreneurial companies, which are creative companies that are relatively new, can encourage work-life balance in their employees. Even if the managers don't do that, they can make that a corporate reality. We've already read about the work environment at Google. That sounds incredibly different than what we might normally associate with it. Okay? But it's all a question of the amount of effort that the business is willing to put into that. Why would okay, so let's ask this question. Why would a business want to promote or encourage work-life balance among its employees?
Well, I would say probably because if they're more level-headed employee, like for instance, if you have somebody who has a family at home, and he's trying to provide for his family, but he is at the same time a very big benefit and asset to your company because he's great at what he does. Obviously, you don't want to burn him out, so you would try to promote the work-life balance so he can be with his family, his wife, and his kids, or whatever the case might be for that. But you're also keeping him as because he's an essential asset to your company.
Okay, and this allows him to address his priorities in a way so that if he knows his family is being taken care of when he's at work, he doesn't then waste his time at work because he's able to spend the time he needs, and that means he's more likely, or she, is much more likely to be able to invest and be productive when they are at work, right? We look, for example, at Google that pays this pretty significant death benefit to employees' families. If I know working for Google that they are going to take care of my family if I was to pass away, it would probably encourage me to work harder to maintain my productivity so that Google is going to be able to honor that even if I'm not there. I want this company to succeed because it takes care of my family if it's around, even if I'm not. Okay, Winter, you had something you wanted to add?
I was thinking like basically the same thing where like if they have like a life outside of work, then they're probably going to be a little bit more well-rounded than if they only focused on work. So they get like a little bit more diversity in like how they can, like I don't know, like social interaction comes a lot from like from like interacting with people outside of work, not just how I don't know.
I was waiting for Chick-fil-A to come up at some point in your conversation.
No.
But for example, I used to work at a company that said, we recognize that we have student employees. So as soon as you get your final exam schedule, please submit that to your supervisor so that we can schedule so that you can attend your finals. Because we know that if we can plan your schedule so that you can take your finals and still work without disrupting the company, it's better for the company. Because you're going to take your finals one way or another, either because you're taking sick leave or something else. And when you take sick leave, it leaves us shorthanded. So planning ahead and giving you a work-life balance actually makes our work easier to do because we don't have to deal with widespread absenteeism by something as simple as recognizing that we have a lot of student employees that are going to need that time. So let's schedule this ahead of time. Small thing, huge work-life balance management. Okay. All right. Anthony, are you with us?
That I am.
All right. Anthony, what question would you like to answer?
Okay. I would like to answer question number 4.
Number 4.
Being humbly in the garage of its founders is Hewlett Packard. Or I guess it's C. Also, I think that like the companies that start out in garages and stuff and like the stories are so cool because it shows that literally companies can start from anywhere. It doesn't really matter where they're starting from if there's like goods and services are needed and valued.
Okay. I would also argue that Apple started in a garage with Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. Is it Steve Wozniak? Two Steves. Okay. But yeah, this idea that so many times we have this perception that I have to have this massive infrastructure to have a successful business. But the truth is, businesses can start very small in incredibly humble places and expand dramatically. It's all about the quality of your idea and the manner in which you go about looking for opportunity. Okay, perfect.
It
Yes.
really matters in like their drive. Like if they were like, okay, well, we can work like maybe a day this week, or they were always just kind of putting it off, that their company may have never gone. It may have never gone anywhere and gotten as popular as it did.
Exactly. That it's as much about the nature and focus of the person starting the business as the idea itself. So, one of the largest fast food market chains in the world is
McDonald's.
Who founded McDonald's?
Walmart,
Nope.
Wasn't it two brothers?
Yes, it was two brothers that started one burger shop. Ray Kroc stopped at the place, was so impressed, he bought the franchise from the brothers, and because they were just satisfied doing this one little store. Ray Kroc saw the potential and built it into what we've become. Facebook is another classic example of an idea that was being created, there was the debate. Okay, if you've ever watched The Social Network, it's a fascinating look at people having new ideas and who's willing to drive a product forward. Okay, let's see, Jack. Jack going once. Jack going twice. Scott. Oh, did I skip you? I did. That's right, somebody threw me off. Okay, Winter, you're up.
Okay, I'm gonna do 46.
Number 46.
It says, what factors does an employee consider when deciding the type of management they would prefer to work with? The book highlighted like how people would prefer to work for people who, like, if I would lead this company a certain way, then I want to work with people who also would lead a certain, like, that way.
Okay. So an alignment of management styles.
Mhm.
Okay, that's a pretty big one.
It's probably like beliefs and stuff can also line up.
Okay. Alignment of personal, ideological, or social ideologies. Do they have the same religion that I do? Or do they believe in the same political ideas that I have? Okay. What's the challenge in this question? How do I know? How much can I determine about a person's management style before I start working with them? I can know what I want, but the thing is, all it really comes down to is, do they want me for the job? And then I'm going to find out what kind of boss I have. There's no way for me to research that ahead of time. Not in any way meaningful. The better thing is, I would suggest that it's more effective for somebody to not consider what management style do I want, but to learn how to work with multiple if this is the job I want, how can I put up with the management style that the person has, regardless of what it is? Okay? All right. Sorry, Winter. All right, Scott, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, sorry for that.
No, you're good.
What?
Let's do number 18.
Number 18. Okay, go for it.
Which is the best example of a novelty craze? And I would say that is B, pet rocks.
Pet rocks. I would also say flavored sodas. I would say, what are some of the other big ones? You know those micro ice cream dots?
Oh, what are they?
Dippin' Dots.
Dippin' Dots.
Dippin' Dots. Man, there's a billion of them. There's a lot of food-based crazes right now. The fidget spinners. Classic example of a fad craze. It was a huge thing for 6 months, and then all the people that started it up figured to get out of it, and then everybody else was left trying to sell stuff that nobody wanted. Okay? All right, so what was the deal with pet rocks? How did somebody manage to sell rocks to people?
It's really good advertising for like a dad gift. The kid says, oh, I want a pet, I want a pet. Oh, I got you a pet. Pet rock.
It's a pet rock. Because parents,
Get a rock outside.
that's true. But there was something about the packaging, the novelty of it, the funniness of getting something that seems so overly ridiculous.
1995.
It's 1995. Okay? The only thing that I can think is equivalent to this is, they used to sell sea monkeys.
Oh.
Sea monkeys was another classic one. Okay? All right. Haley, you're up.
I'm going to do number 16.
Number 6. Okay.
The psychological approach is the theory that reaches self-esteem and convinces people that if they use certain products, they can feel better about themselves.
Okay.
It makes people think that, hey, if I use this, then it's into their heads.
This is the classic example of, if you truly love her, you will get the biggest ring possible. Or a child, as a grandparent, every kid needs a Snuggie, or a pillow pet, or insert thing here. And that if you get this for them, you will therefore be the good parent, or the loving parent that gets their child what they need. Okay? One of the things that I see a lot with the psychological approach is, and it's not so prevalent here in Idaho, but educational support and testing support. is huge in some markets. If you want your kid to get into the best school possible, they have to score abnormally well on the SAT or ACT. Come to our school, come to this testing center, and we can guarantee a 40 to 80 point increase in your child's test scores. Because what the school your kid gets into is going to determine the entire arc of their future. We don't find that as much here in Idaho, but there are other large markets where that is very much the selling pitch. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Haley. All right, Sam, you're up.
47.
Number 47. Okay. This is an interesting question. What do you think?
Yeah, so I agree. I think it's really interesting because when you're talking about established versus startup, I think most people say it's more challenging to be established, but I think it's a startup. The reason I say startup is because a startup doesn't have as much experience or expertise when it comes to the learning curves. For example, they won't have an HR person or these other resources big corporations have, people that are specialized in communication or assisting with employees or different aspects like that. And so I think for a startup, it's a lot more challenging to work with the people you have.
Okay.
You know, you talk about funding and so on and so forth.
Okay. So when we talk about the word culture, the tricky thing about culture is that it creates artifacts, things that we can see or touch or hear. Okay? For example, when I worked at Dairy Queen, I had to wear the hideous brown slacks and blouse. And I swear it was a blouse because it had a flared bottom and I was a guy. And I was going, this is really feminine. But I wanted a job, so I said, what the heck? Okay? That's an artifact. It suggests a hidden element, which is by having everybody wear a uniform, that promotes a sense of shared identity. The identity itself is not the uniform, it's the sense of community that it suggests. Okay? So a culture is a collection of shared values, beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. And I would agree with Sam that the argument is, what is the benefit of an established business? That culture already exists. It might not be the culture I want, but I already have that shared vision. When I'm talking about a startup, what happens? I have to create all of it. There's nobody that says, I remember how we've done this. Or do you remember last year at the company? There was no last year's company picnic. There's never been a company picnic yet. Everything you do is going to be the first time. And that can be incredibly hard to manage because once I have an established event, I can either improve or, what's the opposite of improve? Or worsen the culture from that moment, right? So if I have a Christmas party and everybody loved it, they're going to look forward to the next one. But if I'm in a startup, I have to have that first one and I have to establish the tone and expectation. And that can be incredibly hard to manage. The benefit of it is you're building culture together. Okay, for example, I've been here for 20 years. I tell stories about people that most of the people that are working here have never met. There's no shared memory of that person and their idiosyncrasies, the funny things that they did. I can remember it, but there's very few other people that do. I still carry on traits and behaviors that I learned from those people that nobody ever met. And so they ask me, well, why do you do that? Well, because Diane taught me that. Well, who's Diane? Right? When we're talking startup, everybody has shared experience because everything's done for the first time. But it can be tricky. Okay. All right. Billy, are you with us?
I am.
All right. What question would you like to answer?
Can I do 13? Why is social media presence a must?
Go for it.
Okay, so I think it's CND. One, it drives brand awareness and revenue, and it can influence new purchase decisions. I think it's really important just in general too. Like a lot of the newer generations are always on their phones or always have like their social media active. And if you don't really have a presence on that, they're not gonna see you through other things as much.
Okay, social media has now become a primary communication tool for a lot of people. It's where they get news. It's where they get social interaction and relationships. It's where they get exposed to new ideas. It is a genie that is now out of a bottle. And for all of the problems that it presents, it is very, very hard to conceptualize how we would abandon social media now that we have gotten accustomed to it. So that being the case, just like you said, it does drive brand awareness, because while I might not be that influenced by celebrity spokespeople or things like that, if a friend of mine that I trust recommends a restaurant, I'm going to go there. If I go on social media and say, who would you recommend as a new dentist, doctor, whatever, the people that I know whose opinions I trust are going to have a bigger influence on whether I go to a new place or not. Okay? And then also, it also exposes me to new things. It makes me aware of things that, especially with startups, might not be able to afford traditional advertising and media buys. Okay? Excellent. All right, Josh, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I'd like to do number 19.
Number 19. Okay, go for it.
How do children view advertising? It's C, the same information as from a trusted adult.
Okay, yeah, most kids tend to assume that advertising is honest and true. If they see kids riding big wheels, what do they automatically assume? It's good for everybody. If I see kids playing on a video game on TV, I must assume that everybody else has that game, even if that's not true, right? They tend to not be able to view it through a level of skepticism that parents or adults tend to have. For example, if I see a hamburger on TV, I'm going to go to the McDonald's and expect to see a hamburger that looks exactly like what I saw on TV, right? That the meat's like that thick, massive, fresh-looking tomato with a little bit of condensation on it, right? Cheese perfectly melted, big fluffy bun, and then I actually order the kids meal, and it's this weak, kind of flaccid hamburger that's like, this is not what they showed on TV. Welcome to the world of reality, right? You really want to be depressed, watch a video on how they make food commercials and all of the fakes. For example, cereal on TV is made with blue because it looks whiter than milk and guarantees that it doesn't mess up. And then they spray all of the cereal with hairspray so it doesn't absorb any liquid, so it doesn't get soggy. I mean, it's depressing, some of the things they do to make food look the way it does. And that's why I hate Taco Bell that always advertises for food at about 9, 10 o'clock, because they know you're about to get, and it's Taco Bell more than anybody else. They advertise at 9 and 10 o'clock. So, sorry, I went off a bit on that one. All right, Tanner, are you with us? Tanner going twice. All right, Cattell.
All right. I'm gonna try 41.
Number 41.
Explain the emotional issues faced by family and
Okay.
I'll do the Facebook. in all those long hours. He was so driven, it took a toll on himself. And he had,
An emotional breakdown.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he carried so much of the stress of trying to get this up and running that he started to emotionally abuse his coworkers just because of his need to make this thing work. It's a very real problem. All right, Kyle, are you with us today?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Can you scroll up? Can I do number 30?
Number 30. Okay.
So I said true, and I don't remember who was it before me that kind of touched on this, but I said it was true because the children have not developed judgment skills enough. So when they see advertisements, they're still seeing it as like a trusted adult is giving them information to believe in.
Right. So I grew up in the day when you would actually see advertisements for Star Wars figurines. And I remember watching these kids playing with these G.I. Joe or Star Wars figures, and they always had some incredible layout that they were playing with these toys in. But you go and buy the toy and you bring it home and you realize, guess what you have to rely on?
Yeah.
Your head, because then you didn't have this incredible moon base that you could play on these things with that these kids have, right?
Right.
Where like the kid would be driving the car and breaking through all these bricks to show how tough the truck was. There were no bricks at home unless you made them yourself, right? So but kids I didn't connect that. And probably good for me that I was required to use my imagination rather than relying on somebody else's. Okay? But yeah, the responsibility of the consumer for making informed judgments decreases if the advertisement is aimed towards kids. Because the kids have to be held responsible for that. So you're correct.
Cool.
Okay. Caden, I didn't have you on the list. Are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
I didn't have you on the list, but I knew I was going to get to you. So what number would you like?
That's all right. Can I do number 40?
Number 40. Okay, go for it.
So define the digital era and identify ethical issues related to it.
Okay.
So the digital era just means that the internet is the single most influential factor of our culture today. And I guess some of like the ethical problems related to it's like what I think of is things like browser cookies. They make it so you can be like targeted for ads.
Yes.
I don't know. That was the big one that kind of popped up to me in my head. So
Questions of privacy, right?
yeah.
How many times have I said something to my wife near the Alexa dot in our house and suddenly my Facebook feed fills up with it and you realize, I wonder if Alexa is actually listening to me. How many times have I looked over and the Alexa light is spinning even though I'm not talking to it? And I tell it, Alexa, turn off, and it just kind of keeps on going. And I'm wondering, what's it doing? Okay, excellent. Questions of privacy, questions of access. One of the scary things is when a friend of mine posts something, I can go to that friend's post and then I can gain access through them to post several different levels away from that person by using connections, right? I post on a comment, another person posts on a comment, even though I'm not connected to them and they don't know who I am, I can gain access to their feed and other people's feed through them. Okay, excellent. All right. Anybody have any questions or comments that we'd like to go other than, I know Haley's about to ask about the random number generator. Hearing none, let's do that and then get you guys on your way. Minimize that. Okay, so actually, let's do this.
Anyway, look at how that worked out.
I tell you what. Okay, so Logan's going, Logan says, no, this works perfectly. All right, so we have max of 19. All right, so number 12, Haley.
Yay.
Anthony. And Kason. Man, you guys get lucky. All right, that's everything I have for today, folks. Just remember, next Tuesday, make sure that you are here because we are going to be going over the final assignment and you're going to want some instruction on this one. All right, I will see you all on Thursday, though.
Is it a really hard assignment?
It is not a hard assignment, but I think that it's one of those things I want to provide some